All right, Scotch class number 2. I'm gonna talk about the malt production. So I went through uh, the basics like the barley malt, and then like fermenting, distill, and then like store it, that kind of stuff. I'm gonna go more into details. I'm gonna do up to fermenting. So one of the most unique thing about Scotch whiskey is, or the single malt, it's called the malting process, and they use barley as a main ingredient, which is malted. They use malted barley as an ingredient, and for single malt, it's 100% malted barley. Okay, so it all starts with barley, and Scotland is a major region for growing barley, very famous, and they've been famous and still famous today. So even uh, other countries say you want to make a single malt style whiskey in the United States, or of course Japan, a lot of them still use Scottish barley. They import from Scotland, and I'll explain a little bit later uh, about it. So it all starts with the barley and Scottish barley. Today there are there are farms that they grow in like huge quantity, and it's rare that you grow your own barley. There are some distilleries like I don't have the bottle, but Bruichladdich Distillery that has Port Charlotte or Octomore or Classic Lady, that kind of stuff. They claim that they use 100% barley that's grown in the island. So some companies, they take it a little more serious, that they use only local ingredient, and so on and so like that's like kind of depends on that's like the uniqueness of the company. Some people do that. So you source barley, and then the unique thing is this malting process, which I explained a little bit last time, where barley it's a grain, it's a starch, so it doesn't have sugar on its own. So you want to do this process called the malting process. Basically, you steep the barley with water, drain it, and steep it another with water, so that the barley water like percentage is like 40 whatever percent. By soaking it with water, basically it starts to sprout. Uh, it's called germination. Germination is this thing that happens, that it wants to sprout and like grow. So in the process, it converts from starch into sugar by like being soaked in water. So that's what you want. A human wants this. Human wants the sugar to make the alcohol, right? So this is the malting process. This is like pretty much unique to barley. Other grains, like say corn, you steam corn and eat it. It's already sweet, right? So like corn, you don't really need the malting process. Or like other grains, you mix it. It's like some of them are already sweet, so you don't really need to go through this malting process. So it's kind of unique to barley. So once this is done, you have created sugar, but then if you overdo it, it's gonna use up all the sugar and it'll start growing. And so you wanna stop it at a certain point. So to do that, you cook it basically. To stop it, in order to stop. And that's called it's hard to pronounce, but cleaning. Yeah, there's a thing called a kiln, Kiln. It's a name of a facility. It's called, you use the kiln to kilning the barley, that's malted barley. So it's this house that has like on the bottom, you put heat source, traditionally like just wood or coal or charcoal or whatever that burns. Today, a lot of companies, they use gas. And so you have a heat source in the bottom, and then second floor, there's like a mesh, and then you put the malted barley over it. So like with the slow heat, the hot air comes from the bottom. It kind of cooks it, bakes it. It's like an oven. A lot of them will have like a multiple, like 2 or 3 stories layered, so they can do more often. So this will cooks it, and if you use just gas, it's relatively clean, right? There's like not much smell or no smoke or anything. But you can use like something that makes smoke, that it's heating up, but it's also the smoke is coming out, so it'll flavor the barley. So this is where the process called the peated comes in. So there's this thing called peat, P-E-A-T. Peat is basically a mud. It's a dirt that's made from seaweed. So Scotland is, of course, like there's a bunch of oceans and there's seaweed that used to be in the sea, but now it's above ground, and it's like muddy. So that you just go to this area that has peat, and then you just dig it, and then you just dig it out to about this big, and then you sun dry it. It becomes dry, and it's like it burns. You can use it as a heat source. So Scotland, there's not much forest, and you don't really have coals, or like in the old days, having a secure heat source was very important, because you can't just like cut tree and burn it, because they don't have much tall trees. They're just shorter trees, but it's super cold and windy. So they used to use this for like a household, like a heat source all the time. So it's a great thing. It's all over the place, and then you just dig it, dry it, and then you can use it as a heat source. But the only thing is, because it's made from seaweed, it's very stinky, it's very salty. It has a very distinct smell to it, and you use this to heat up the barley. The smell gets into the barley, so that style is called peaty. Yeah. I have a peaty single malt, Peat Monster, and Kalila. It's one of them. And nowadays, it's so originally it was like a thing out of necessity, that you don't have any other heat source to burn and expensive, so you use it as like a cheaper option originally. Today, it's more like a tradition, or like our distinct flavor, and it's popular in this island. Not limited to Isla, but popular, and today it's kind of their signature flavor. And there are some companies like the Blue Kaladi Octomore. They go real far. They put like super heavy peaty and extra extreme, and they even put like a number. It's called ppm, parts per milliliter. It's like there's like a measurement of how much smoke like this chemical is in the barley, and if it's like above something ppm, it's like, oh, it's like super smoky or stuff like that. There's like a measurement today. So that's peat. Basically, it's dry mud, and now you have a cooked malted barley that kept the sugar, and then you mill it. Not much details here. Just grind it, and it's sold as is today. So today, all this like harvest, malting, kilning, and then cooked, and then milled as like a grain, like a fine grain. You can buy this online today if you wanna make Scotch, like Scotch style single malt today. Like say you have a distillery in Texas, you wanna make whiskey, you wanna make single malt style whiskey, you can import already milled, ready to go barley that's from Scotland and made this. Okay, how many percent peated or is it non-peated? Today you can buy. Yeah, even like so a lot of like Japanese uh, whiskeys, they import it from Scotland, and some of them are already peated that you can pick today. So that's the milling part. And next is mashing and fermenting. Not much details on here. Basically, all the ready-made like malted barley, you mix it with water, and then there's like a long slow mashing or fast mashing, whatever. But basically you mix together, it becomes a sugary water. And then fermenting is you add yeast to it. The yeast converts sugar into alcohol, so it becomes alcoholic liquid. So mashing is like non-alcoholic. Fermenting is it becomes alcohol. So this is like kind of like up till here, it's very similar to the making beer. If you ferment, then keep the carbonation, and then you add hops to flavor it, it's pretty much beer. It's not exactly the same method, but very, very similar. Fairly similar. Yeah, going back to the mashing, for single malt Scotch whiskey, you only use single grains, so single like malted barley. You only use one type of barley, right? So there's not much to it, but say bourbon or like a blended whiskey or American whiskey, this becomes more the key. So like I'm not gonna explain too much in detail, but especially for like a bourbon, what's gonna be your mash build? Mash build. There's a term called mash build. Basically, it means like how many percentage of the grain you are using. If it's a bourbon, you have to use 50% or more corn. So 50% is a given, but like what's the rest? Is it high rye mash, high wheat mash, or high corn, or like if it's like a certain pH, they call it the sour mash. Sour mash. So there's like the mashing is for Scotch whiskey is not like a big thing, but for bourbon or American whiskey, it's more. This is more important. Yeah, since like a bourbon, you don't have to go through all this process. The corn is already sweet. Yeah, so that's it becomes more of a. If I do a class on bourbon, this will be more important. Yeah, and then ferment, and now after it's fermented to like a beer or more, I think it's like a malt wine, like I forgot how many percent, 10, 12% alcohol, then it's ready to be distilled. And that's gonna be the video for next one. Yay! Yay!